And our first order of business this evening is our Green Themes presentation on the solar project at Haslett Community Church by David Arnosti. Welcome and thanks for coming along.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to tell about. Are you able to see a signal there?
Not now.
No,
Okay.
no, whatever was done last interrupted that signal.
All right.
Kind of flashed a couple of times and then went away.
Uh-oh.
Speaking of high tech, where did our?
Nope,
Oh, wait,
it's
trying.
It's trying.
To communicate.
Yeah.
I see.
Thank you. Thank you.
I should have brought a portable projector and a white sheet like I did last Friday.
How old is your computer?
About a year and a half. So
I
it's
have one that looks just like it, and the plugs are beginning to get a little shaky, so I sometimes have to very gently position them and then not move.
just a bad plug. Okay, if you can just
Can
stand
also be
there.
able to. Yeah, that's right.
There we go.
Oh, darn it. But do you know it's a bad plug or a bad cable? It could be a bad cable too.
One of the two. I've used the plug.
Yeah, because it's up there first.
Without a problem.
Do you have another HDMI cable?
That's right. Makes everything good.
I was at a conference last month where the speaker's presentation wouldn't show up on the screen. He said, never mind. And he just gave his 15-minute talk. It was excellent. I think all those PowerPoint slides were just going to get in the way.
In class. It's really fun.
Yeah, a real joy.
Okay, we'll move forward.
Depends what you're trying to show.
Is it still giving a little wheel?
I mean, we're getting
See
flashes.
anything here?
What about at the other end of the cable? Where the other end of the cable is plugged in?
That's somewhere down below.
Yeah, I presume if we see it, they see it.
Yeah.
Both ways.
Okay, so we'll try one alternative thing. So let me just turn this off.
Was that the only port that you could use on that computer?
Yeah, try it.
We do get to see. Physical magic, it's always nice to.
It's nice.
So what I'll do is, let me just go to manual mode here and you can follow along. That should be okay too. Okay. Can we see that? Oh. This one was. Okay, that should be good enough. And I will just use my finger, which, oh, actually, it's still working here. So I'm really pleased to be able to give a progress report in a way, interactions that came from work in our church and people in the township who have helped out, and energy team. And what I'd like to do is, I looked at some of the previous green team presentations and realized other people had a lot of soil salinity, water flow, maps and things like that. I'm going to give some technical information, but I'd like to focus on maybe more the human side, because I think an important part of the township's goal in achieving more renewable and sustainable development in the future is going to need community engagement and outreach and not just the engineering. And so that's something that we've been involved in our project. So I'm representing the Haslett Community Church's Green Team. Rich Baumgartner, our head, is here in the front row, checking to make sure what I say is okay. And what I'd like to talk about today is how did we do it? That is our recent solar project, some lessons that were learned, and where do we go from here? It's specifically how this might interact with the township. So our church is a medium to small size congregation. We have about 100 giving units. That's how people rate those things. We have two pastors, Pastor Aaron Heisler and Kurt Kirchhoff, and we are located right in the heart of Haslett. Many people know our church because it's hosting the Haslett Food Pantry. We have many community volunteers who help out there and serve 100 to 200 families a year. Rich is also involved in the food pantry, so he knows. So this is the face of the church that many people know, our north entrance. Physically, we're located just south of Lake Lansing off of Haslett Road, and the map shows you the actual church building. You'll notice that the sanctuary, which goes east to west, has a large south roof. And it occurred to some of us who were thinking renewable energy and solar, what if we put solar panels on our south roof? So it sounded easy. And for the purpose of the finance committee and other people in the church, we actually put together a timeline with many things that had to happen over a 3-year period for this to come together. It wasn't so simple as just screwing the solar panels on the roof, as it turned out. So in 2014, in the beginning of the year, we hosted a number of speakers who talked about global warming issues, renewability, the ethics of environmental consciousness. And from Great Lakes Renewable Energy, Dave Conkle came out and talked to us about community solar projects. And we hooked up with Jim Detchen at Edgewood Church in East Lansing, who is environmental journalism professor, now emeritus, who is working on a parallel solar project. Then in late 2015, our church formed a green team, which was actually the group of individuals who shepherded this project along. The second step with this timeline was actually coming up with a plan. So one key element in that plan was a visit by John Sarver and Leroy Harvey, who came to our green team meeting in early February 2016 when we were kind of flailing around trying to figure out, should we somehow be involved in a community solar project or do I own? And they basically gave us a big cheer and encouragement to do it yourself. The economics really look like that, which we did. And by the end of last year, we had rounded up informal promises from people in the community and the congregation to support that project. We put out a letter to a number of people who were interested within our immediate community saying that our Christian faith and our view of stewardship of the creation moves us to do something. We had already taken care of energy efficiency around the church, and the next step was looking at renewable energy. I have to say, I drafted that letter and sent it out and waited for just waves of cash to flow in. And there was just a big silence. Nothing happened. It was that point when Sarver and Harvey came and visited us and kind of juiced our goose. We got moving again. So one thing that was important about this whole process is we had outside help. We had interactions with a statewide organization, Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, who helped us form a green team and connected us with other individuals around the state who were doing similar projects so we could trade ideas. Most importantly, they connected us with Edgewood Church, who had interactions with a contractor who we ended up going through. We also crunched the numbers for our church. We realized after looking over the recent year's bills that our church uses about 36,000 kilowatt hours of electrical energy per year. That had gone down about 10% over the last few years as we installed LED lightings and other efficiencies. And we also did some number crunching to see how a solar project would pay off and made some assumptions about future power costs and realized that we definitely would be able to more than recoup our costs going in. And depending on the future price of electricity, that would happen sooner or later.
my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. Could you just give us a little bit more detail on that?
Yes. So the expected power production or energy production from this system based on its exposure and the number of panels would be 24,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, about 2/3 of our church's annual use per year. And depending on what you figure for cost of electricity, that would be about $3,000 of avoided costs if we're allowed to net meter, which, as you may know, the state of Michigan recently passed legislation affirming that net metering would continue so that you essentially can turn the meter backwards. Small energy producers, that is those with a power plant of 20 kilowatts or less, which is what we have, are allowed to net meter. If you have larger power plants, then you have to contract and sell it at wholesale rates. So there's a sweet spot for institutions like ours to put in something up to 20 kilowatt capacity. This $3,000 would be over every year for the life of the system, which might be 25 or 30 years. Nobody knows exactly because they haven't been around so long. There would be some expected repairs as the inverters wear out after 10 to 15 years. Otherwise, very little maintenance likely. And we didn't know what the future price of electricity is, so my forest economist who was crunching the numbers put in a very conservative, like 2% for the next 10 years and then no increase after that, which I thought was ridiculously low. But frankly, we don't know what the future price of electricity is. And the reason that we were proposing the project was not simply to save money immediately, but because we felt that it was important to be part of a movement to help people to get into a renewable future. And it would save the church immediately on our utility bills.
So am I reading that you're in a kind of 20 to 25 year
Yes, depending
time frame?
depending on things that we don't know about, like what's the price of electricity in 10 years. That's right. So it definitely, we could, even making very simplistic assumptions, we would more than get our money back, but we don't know how quickly, and depends on things that are not known at this time. The contractor, that is Ian Olmsted at Peninsula Solar, provided us with an outlook on energy recapture. So during the summertime, this size unit would be producing around, it looks like 2,500 kilowatt hours during the sunny summer months and considerably less during the winter, depending on how much snow and because of the days are shorter. The orange bars show you how much sunshine we get in Michigan, or solar energy, and the little blue bars are at the bottom showing how much you actually capture as electricity because the systems are not 100% efficient. So the panels are around 20% efficient, and then there are various line losses and things like that. So this is all very standard. In fact, the whole setup is utterly conventional. There's nothing unusual about it, and our contractor and others have put up many of these systems. And as pointed out by a recent presentation over at Urban Options, or Urban Energy Alternatives, what is it called now? Michigan Energy Options. The grid-tied solar arrays like this one, where excess power goes back into the grid, are highly reliable. It's only when you start fiddling around with batteries that you have to do a lot more repairs. So we wanted to go with a simple, state-of-the-art yet very well understood technology. Another important angle for this, though, was that we decided to dedicate it to Joyce Bartels, a member of our congregation and a member of our green team, who was almost 91 when she passed away last year, and had always been a strong advocate for renewable energy and had in fact helped us get some of the smaller projects done. This was important because it gave a human face to what we were doing as a project, and many people came and contributed it because they felt warm and fuzzy about Joyce Bartels and her work with the Haslett Women's Club and with many other things. And they knew that she was always promoting environmental consciousness, so it really did fit in with that. It also allowed people to make a connection with this kind of project that once they bought in, it was their project. we didn't really realize what we were doing going into this. A lot of this sounds very planned out, but that's not necessarily. So we found that buying in from the community was a critical part of our capital campaign. So one of our community donors, in fact, is sitting over here. Paul was one of the people who helped put together this pie chart. So before we went public with this, we rounded up from different people in the congregation and outside of the congregation $51,000 of pledges for a $59,000 project. And we said, look, these are the people who are willing to support it if we can go ahead, if the churches go for it. And at that point, we were almost there. And so that extra input from the community was really quite convincing to church council and finance that this is something that many people are supporting. And we got additional support then from the Haslett Women's Club and Joyce Spartel's family and many other supporters of solar in the community. So some technical considerations, just a few numbers. It's a 20 kilowatt system. That's the power rating. On a sunny day in summer, that's the maximum power it's going to put out at any one time. The amount of energy it produces, just multiply power by 1.2 for Michigan and you get the amount of annual power. So if it's a 20 kilowatt system, it'll probably make about 24,000 kilowatt hours over the course of a year. That's just a rule of thumb that's kind of nice if you don't have a lot of shading. We knew that would be a good number because it's less than our church uses. So you want to put a solar system that's somewhat under the capacity or the total rating. Otherwise you can't net meter. There's various laws. We also realized that one of the big electric draws on the church was the food pantry. So we have 6 freezers that are running, and that total about 15% of our electric use. So as we pointed out to many community donors, that by giving money for this project, they would be supporting the food pantry, which supports people in the community who are low income and need help with food assistance. So we are guessing it'll probably be around for about 30 years. Maintenance will certainly involve swapping out inverters. They have a lifetime about half that of the system. And we are estimating that we'll be avoiding $3,000 a year in utility costs. So some larger considerations, because we're not going to save the world with one solar roof, but a lot of people doing these kind of things are going to move us in the right direction. And so we realized it would be good publicity for the church, and we specifically tried to make it publicly visible so that other people might think along those lines and realize that it could be something for them too, including the township, which I know has made some moves in that direction. We also used it as a way to demonstrate what the church does in the community, like I mentioned, the food pantry activities. And we've profited from our interactions with the township, which has been very supportive of this, both encouraging, some people actually gave us money, and also making sure that our permit went through swiftly. That was one of the steps that we had to get through, and showing up at our dedication ceremony, which was really nice for the reporters, just asking, well, who is this and what are they doing? I'd like to point out that a colleague of mine at the university who lives in a different township, not Meridian Township, is very interested in putting up a solar array, a ground mount solar array, and they've had nothing but grief. They've been encountering a lot of resistance because people don't want to have something that's new. And I find very refreshing and positive that Meridian Township really has a future-oriented tack. And I don't want to mention that other township because you guys are recording this on TV. And that could get me into trouble. But I think that it's not necessarily a given that everybody would realize that these kind of projects are a net positive both for people living in the community and also for helping lead our renewability efforts. So we decided that we would dedicate it on Earth Day, and then we decided actually the day after Earth Day would be best, so that weekend. And the timeline this year went very fast. So after we got an okay to go ahead with the church, we met with our contractor, Ian Olmsted at Peninsula Solar. We had our dedication by the end of April. The solar panels themselves arrived the day before the dedication, so that was convenient. It was supposed to be done, but it wasn't quite. And then in the last few weeks, the inverters have been installed, the solar panels have been installed, we've tested it, it's up and running. We signed our operation agreement with Consumers Energy. They approved that earlier this week, and within the next 2 weeks, they'll come out, swap out our meter for a two-way meter, and then we'll be up and running. So we've already been allowed to run it on a test basis, and 2 Sundays ago, the coffee after the service was cooked with solar electricity. That was very nice. So just a couple of pictures on what it looks like. Here's our planning group looking at the side of the church. Where are they going to put the inverters beforehand, and where are they going to put the modules? That's the south roof that I pointed out before. So part of this involved digging out blueprints from an old box from 1956 to figure out what the roof is made out of. That had to be engineered. A separate contractor then looked over the plans, and then they have to agree that, yes, this is engineered up to specs, that it's not going to blow off in heavy winds. Then we had a press release formulated by one of our members who's an expert that went out and notified media about what we were going to do. Like I said, the day before the dedication, then the panels arrived, and Peninsula Solar, our contractor, set up some displays so people there at the dedication could see the signs. We crafted a Joyce Bartel's Memorial Solar Project poster with information about the person who we were dedicating this to, and had a plaque that was dedicated at that time. We had a service after the service that our pastor Kurt Kirchhoff put together, and the choir sang, and people from the church and the community came. We had a pretty good crowd. We had Channel 10, Channel 6, we had HOMTV, we had print media as well. We had members of the Meridian Township came and looked at things, dedication. Somebody even made a cake with solar panels on it. So that was all of this different kinds of ways of reaching people. Some people are interested in the electrical goods, and other people are interested in the people side of things. We also had students from MSU come out. These are students from Climate Reality Project who are working with MSU to turn MSU to all renewable energy. And so they came and talked about what they were doing with people who were visiting. So we thought that that was a useful outreach too. News media then came, gave interviews. There's Rich, and then we had a number of TV stories to go with Earth Day on this. And right after that, then we installed the inverters, which are the things that convert DC electricity to AC, which is what we need in the church. And shortly after that, then the panels went up, 68 of them. This is a Solar World manufacturer. These are domestically sourced solar panels from a large factory in Oregon that Ian has used quite a bit and is happy with their quality. That's the completed solar system on top of the church. On a day like this, with that kind of sun, it would be probably putting out close to maximal, close to 20,000 watts, which would be excess, and we would be putting back quite a bit of electricity into the grid. So just a couple of lessons then. Having a renewable energy project that you can touch and see makes it real. And the realer and more local you can have it, I think the more people can connect with that. Even as very large renewable energy projects are also being built, I think having these kind of projects that are visible allow people to understand that it's a doable technology. It's not something that's theoretical. Some initial skepticism that it was a flaky idea was overcome when we could show that economically it did make sense, particularly because people were donating the money, so the church would be immediately saving money for other projects. And people who were not particularly interested in the whole green idea were personally engaged because of it's something on their building, something they see every day, and we're going to have a monitor inside so they can see the performance. The publicity was positive also for the church and the township. And one of our members even wrote a new verse for the Janis Joplin song, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz Oh Lord, won't you buy me a photovoltaic? My friends all burn carbon. It is their mistake. Worked hard all my lifetime to get them to change, so Lord, won't you buy them some photovoltaics? Another lesson is that 90 years of persistence pays off. Although Joyce is no longer with us, all of her nagging really did some good work. And how to go forward with the township? Well, we would like to meet with other community groups that are interested and invested in renewable energy and share those experiences. One way that we want to do that is September 24th. We've arranged that we'll have a solar open house at the church. We'd like to invite other houses of worship from the township to come and see what we did and maybe trade some ideas about how they might do that. Invite other community groups and environmental organizations that have information and expertise, and promote the renewable energy mandates that the new township 5-year plan is pushing. That this is one way that we can really realize that, and I think because it's one of the more visible ways, people would be able to connect it with some of the other kind of more global renewability. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Questions for our speaker?
I guess the question I would have is, you mentioned that the permitting process through the township went smoothly for you. Is there anything that you would see in that process that could be improved to help, groups like yours meet that goal that the township has set?
Actually, we found that the township was super helpful, and we didn't have any complaints or thoughts that we would need to speed that up. Many of the delays or slow parts of the project came from our inexperience. We've never put up a solar roof on the church before. And I think what would be very helpful is if the township could use our experience and share that with other people who might be contemplating similar things. It helped us that Edgewood Church had done some of the footwork before. They had found a really good contractor. He had already installed their system in November. So we were able to answer some questions right away, and I think that that's one way that the township could be quite helpful. Long-term, I would love to see the township actually provide a framework for a community solar that people could buy into if they wanted to. We decided not to set up an LLC or do anything fancy, which some people can do, but we didn't have all the legal expertise or time. We decided to just do the simplest method, but for a larger initiative, somebody who lives in a shady spot but is interested in buying into a solar project, much as they're doing in East Lansing, if they could buy a couple of solar panels of a large community project and then get a credit on their tax return, for instance. I know in our tech, we live in Meridian Township, and one of the lines is for street lighting. So there's a specific item in there. We're paying for electricity that's used to light the streets, and if there were some way legally that the township would be able to rebate people with a credit on their tax return, for instance, that would be one way that it would be promoting something on a larger scale. Yes?
That's good to hear that the township was very helpful. What permitting was necessary for you? Just a normal building permit or renovation permit? What was necessary?
Actually, I don't know the name of the permit. I think it's a building permit. So the steps in the planning that needed to go through checking from different bodies included, our contractor looked at the site and then estimated what kind of structural changes he would propose. They contract with an engineering firm in California that just does solar design approvals and had to modify their plan until it met their requirements. And that took a while for the engineers. That's what you guys got. It was certified from an independent agency that we solar engineers agree that what they're proposing is solid. And the next waiting period after putting up the system is interacting with consumers' energy. You have to first ask permission to put up a net metering system. Then you have to have an interconnect agreement signed, and their engineers have to look at what you've put together. And then after all of that's done, they'll come out and put in a new meter, and then you actually interconnect. So the township step was, because we had presumably a highly vetted and clean engineering system already, we weren't trying to put something together on an amateur basis. It probably made it easier for you guys, but.
In addition to the building permit, you of course needed an electrical permit, but your contractors take care of all of that.
Yep.
But I'm kind of curious, with respect to your interactions with Consumers Energy, did that go well?
It has. So they have been most forthcoming personal phone calls from people who are involved in this. Our church is fronting on both Haslett Road and Tonawanda. All of our U.S. mail goes to Haslett Road, but since 1956, Consumers Energy has been selling electricity to a church on Tonawanda. So there was a little back and forth on how to fill out the permit with the right address. And in calling them back and making sure that, have we gone to the next step, they've been very responsive. So I'm pleased to report that at least for this kind of project, we were able to work so far. In less than 2 weeks, we should be actually active. We also found that electrical problems that the church had over the years were coming from old wires that were actually grown into a tree limb and shorting out on the tree. They came out and removed the limbs and put in new wires for us, which I guess we wouldn't have even thought of looking at that if we hadn't thought about putting in a solar panel, but I said, really? Yeah, that was another unexpected thing. So I think that the locals that we've dealt with Consumers Energy have been very professional.
How much lower will your power costs be now that you're not powering the tree?
Yeah, well, no, that was Consumers Energy powering the tree because it was upstream of the meter, yeah. But we were worried about some child climbing in the tree and getting powered by Consumers Energy. So they came right out and removed it. Yeah, so just in summary, this is a very doable project, and it's a lot of work, but with many supporters and also having the right kind of winds blowing at your back, I think you can get it done, and that's something that we'd like to get out there, that message to get out there, so that we can move our township in a direction of green initiatives.
I very much like the way you framed this as a people issue as much as it is a technical issue. And from what I've seen, it sounds like basically what happened is some personal and community energy got translated into some renewable energy.
Yes, I think so.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for coming to share with us.
Thank you.